and welcome back to Fox News at 9. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington with your special extended coverage of Hurricane Florence right now and all through the night. You're looking at live images from the Carolina coast. Hurricane Florence's might on full display. Power outages increasing all across North Carolina. Florence is slowly crawling ever closer to the coast, but the actual landfall when the center of the eye reaches land is hours away. Right now, though, the effects are still potentially life-threatening. Torrential rain, monster waves, and punishing winds. Officials are warning of catastrophic flash flooding for portions of the Carolinas, and it's not going away quickly. We've got team coverage from reporters on the ground, Leland Vittert, Rick Leventhal, and Steve Harrigan live in North Carolina. First, let's go to the Fox Extreme Weather Center, where meteorologist Adam Klotz is standing by with the latest on this massive storm. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Shannon. Yeah, it continues to be a big one. 90-mile-an-hour winds, Category 1 storm. And at this point, it looks as though it's sitting right on the coast. It isn't there yet, but some of those real heavy bands of rains are now moving in. There's your center of circulation. You notice that is still off the coast about 80 miles. But take a look at just these very heavy bands of rain. There's strong winds within these. It's really pushing the water up along the coast also. So there's flood concerns up and down the coast from central North Carolina running you all the way up north to the Outer Banks. The winds have been there also. We're looking at wind gusts getting up to 60 miles an hour in some locations, the mid-50s. These are all right along the coast in communities just inland. Out still a little farther, closer to that eye, which eventually will work its way closer to the coast. We're looking at wind gusts up to 81 miles an hour. We've seen a wind gust of 112 miles an hour. Again, that was out at a buoy, but as this moves closer, those stronger winds are going to keep getting closer to shore, and we're going to see those wind values increase in some of those communities. This is a slow mover, as we mentioned. From where it sits now, taking you to tomorrow, this is all the movement. So just barely down the coast, getting closer to Wilmington, getting closer to the state line of North Carolina and South Carolina. When it moves this slow, what you're going to notice is, as it eventually, you do notice, turns back off and heads up to the northeast, but this slow movement is going to allow it to hover. And that means the winds will continue to batter some of these locations for 48 hours or more. You're going to see the storm surge continue to move in. And then the real problem, and maybe the legacy with this system eventually, is going to be that it's allowed to rain for such a long time. Shannon, we're looking at spots getting up to 20 to 30 inches, even widespread rainfall totals getting up over a foot to 15 inches. Water is going to be the big concern with this by the time it's all said and done.
All right. Adam Klotz working through the night. Thank you, sir. Now we're going to go to Morehead City and correspondent Leland Vittert, who has been right out in the middle of the storm. What are you seeing tonight, Leland? Actually, morning as we now head past midnight.
Yeah, exactly, Shannon. Almost hour 12 of deteriorating conditions, by hour 6 of what you would classify as hurricane-like conditions here. Normally, we'd be done with the worst part of this storm, but in fact, the worst part is just beginning now. This is probably the strongest rain and wind we've seen for most of the night. It's having a bad combination effect here with high tide. You can just now starting to see the water lap over here. This dock already has risen as far as the pylons will let it. So at some point, you get Mother Nature versus man-made dock. Mother Nature normally wins that battle, and then these dock sections turn into sort of barges of destruction that will then float here into Morehead City. The combination here gives you an idea of just sort of the power of the water and the wind combined, and that's going to be the story here over the next 48 hours. It's easy to say, oh, this storm's just a Category 1. I don't see houses being flattened behind you, so everything's going to be okay. That won't be the case, and if this forecast holds, everything will not be okay. This water is going to not be driven just simply here, but it'll be driven back in, deep into North Carolina, where there will be rising floodwaters in hundreds of communities on thousands of streets, and anybody who didn't leave could very easily be trapped. Certainly, we understand now why police and fire were so dogmatic and at times sort of scary in their estimates of how bad this storm could be, because if you didn't evacuate, there's no way to evacuate now. And the time from when the hurricane conditions will subside to when the floodwaters will rise is precious few hours if rescuers need to head out and try to get people out. And that certainly is the concern now. Dangerous conditions for sure. Power out up and down the North Carolina coast here. Somewhere around 100,000 outages, including everybody around where we are. But Shannon, this is certainly just the beginning of this storm, even though under ordinary circumstances, you'd think by time it should be the end.
Yeah, and Leland, you've talked about the evacuation orders, the warnings that have been going on for days now. Have you seen many stragglers? We're going to talk to someone coming up who refused to leave their home. They said they've ridden out storms like this before, and there are certainly always those people who feel better about sticking around and doing that. What about where you are?
Certainly, there were a lot of people who said we're not going to leave, and as we talked to the police chief here today, there were rescues going on of a number of those people. And at the same time, you understand how people feel, and as we stand out here in these conditions and report on them, your heart really breaks for people who are watching in shelters or watching in relatives' houses and seeing these conditions and knowing that this is what their home and their life back home is going through, and they don't know if they're going to have a house to come back to, if it'll be flooded, if they'll still be standing. You really understand and feel for people on both sides of this. Most of all, you feel for the police and the fire departments out here who at times will brave extraordinarily dangerous conditions to come out and rescue people who stayed, even though they say that at some point, and that point has come and gone now with this storm at least, that they're not going to leave. Here, they pulled off a number of their police officers from the bridges and back into the station houses. They've evacuated a lot of the fire department's heavy equipment, and they just said it's too dangerous to head out, and they need to save their equipment for once this storm passes, Shannon.
Hey, and Leland, we're hearing of reports that there are storm surges already of up to 10 feet where you are in Morehead City. I know it's dark and very stormy out there. Are you able to get a sense? You talked about just how far the water has come up with those docks near you.
Well, certainly it's come up, I don't know, 10 feet or so from where it was about 6 o'clock. It's hard to tell how much of that is the tide and how much of that is the storm surge. Definitely over on Atlantic Beach, we were seeing big storm surges as well. Hard to quantify any one number to it, and given the fact that all the power is out, it's impossible for us with any kind of lighting to cut through this and sort of see what's happening. And it's about equally dangerous for us to venture out and try to find any said flooding. But suffice it to say, just based on what's happening here, and as we've heard things crash and break away and the like, you can just imagine what an extra foot or two will do to these dock sections. Very reasonable to understand that beyond our life, there's a lot else to be seen.
All right, Leland, we will check back in with you. Thank you so much on the scene there in Morehead City.